We've had this conversation so many times that I care to count. Do you think there's a comprehensive plan? Most of the tweets that we got coming in this evening with regards exiting this recession was talking about the plan to exit recession. Do you think there's a comprehensive plan to do so?
If there is a plan, I haven't seen it. There appear to be many things being said and not being implemented, or some are being mentioned and the communication is lacking, meaning that I'm not getting the sense that all the things that are being said in terms of taking us out of the recession are actually being done. That's just, coming from my perspective. Now, of course, there are different schools of thought on how you get out of it, get out of a recession. Obviously, what we have here is a situation where we have a fundamental structural problem with our economy. I mean, something as simple as a matchstick, if you just pick one up, it's not produced in Nigeria. So where is the manufacturing? Where are the jobs going to come from? If we move away from oil and go into agric, for example, agric is also, what is the byproduct of an agric? It's a commodity that today globally are price depressed, or down the road, as we produce more of those commodities, they would also go down. So fundamental plan that would say, here are the incentives for manufacturers. If you go into manufacturing, taxes are going to be at this rate. Just boom, 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 make it happen. If the central bank is looking very carefully at price stability, and if it also wants to put as an objective, say, unemployment rate as an aspect to be looked at, a la, say, the Federal Reserve, then what you would see is that there should be that help coming in from financial developmental agencies within the economy that's pushing for production, basically looking inward, So the idea of making a rate call based on foreign investment can then become a moot point, as Dr. Mailafia had mentioned. So the fundamental thing for me is that I haven't seen the plan, or the plan is there, but it is not being executed.
What would you expect to see in that plan?
What I want to see is something that I can explain to a 12-year-old and they can get it. Meaning that here are 5 or 3 things we are going to do. Very simple. And then a journalist sitting on the other side of the table would say, yeah, here are the 3 basic things that we need to do. Because if we look at, for example, if I go down to what this administration had said, there are 3 fundamental things that this administration had said, and even the president had mentioned it this morning, which is security, corruption, and job creation. That is where the fundamentals of the economic policy is. And I haven't been seeing anything. If we go by statistics from January to date, I think we may have lost more jobs than created more. So the net is that we are probably going counter to that plan. So there has to be things that would basically ginger the economy so that more of us that are in the production sector would develop more, would build more, and sell more. And it only happens when there are certain incentives in place, and I haven't seen that.
So talking about the incentives, that's going closer to policies.
Right.
Now, we're talking about monetary policy, fiscal policy, trade policy, energy policy as well. For you, at this time, what should be the first foremost policy they should work on? Because there's been a lot of calls that the National Assembly should also take a very huge stance in terms of legislature, bills to be passed, the ones to be quickly ensure that there's an ease of doing business. For you, Mr. Boyo, which bill would you expect that the National Assembly should be focusing on? Because we're talking about job starting the economy, focusing on manufacturing. You're an industrialist. What do you want to see?
I'm not certain whether it's a question of bills, but I understand, of course, that once you legislate anything, then it becomes binding. And when it comes to that, I would be very happy to see a bill that defines the parameters of price stability. In other words, when you look at the CBN Act 2007, as I say, the prime mandate is price stability. But unfortunately, it has no limits. In other words, you could say that there is price stability when inflation remains at 18% for 20 years. I mean, that's not price stability that would help, okay? So if you wanted truly to move this economy forward, as I say, you have to think like an eagle, okay? What you need to do is definitely create a bill that would make it mandatory for the CBN and its Monetary Policy Committee to emulate what happens elsewhere. In other words, the rate of inflation in successful economies hardly exceeds 2-3%. So if you had a condition within the CBN Act that says, look, you will remain a CBN governor and your Monetary Policy Committee would continue to sit so long as inflation never gets above 4%, in other words, about 2% above international best practice. You could also say that the cost of funds, as defined by the monetary policy rate, should never exceed 2% of LIBOR. That's the London Interbank Offer Rate. That is the official. That is the most popular rate that governs the rates of interest all over the world. So if you had that kind of ball game, you wouldn't have a situation where any CBN governor, as it happened in the last few years, in the last 20 years or so, a CBN governor says, I'm maintaining price stability when inflation is at 17% and cost of funds to the real sector is about 20-something%. So if you could tie the performance of a CBN governor to a requirement within the CBN Act that you will remain a CBN governor so long as you maintain. Because if you don't maintain this, you will continue to be ducks and things. And the reality, of course, is that people come and say, we will have diversification. The reality, of course, is you have a situation where economies are run based on indices, structural indices, which must never be violated. These indices are not there, and you're talking about diversification. How many administrations have said that? They have all failed because they denied the reality of these indices.
All right, we'll be back and then wrap this discussion up in just a moment. To join us again.